Yeah. Okay, the Jentry Podcast. I know that you will be loving it. We here to break it down so that you start to understand your local government. Who are the leaders? Time to get active, do something about it. Dealing with jobs, the workforce, and affordable housing. Motivate and inspire. Elevate, take it higher. For the next generation. Knowledge is power for your community. Giving you the info that you really need. Time to make a change and a difference. Tune in, don't miss it. It's the Jentry. The Jentry Podcast. The Jentry Podcast. Making a change, switching it up.
Hello and welcome to the Jentry Podcast. Today, we have an incredible guest. We have Steve Pauken. He is the City Manager of Bisbee, Arizona. And this one is an incredible episode because this person first came from Ohio and has also been a city manager in so many different places. He's done so well that he retired, and after retire, they had to bring him back. So Steve is a legend, and I'm very excited to have you. Steve, thank you so much. How are you doing today, sir?
Well, I'm doing great and happy to be here.
We definitely appreciate it. Now, I have to jump in as I always do. What is the special sauce of Bisbee? What makes it the best place to live in the United States?
Well, actually, there's quite a few things, but we'll try and keep it within your time frame. Bisbee is a small town on the Mexican border in southern Arizona, Cochise County. And the origins of Bisbee were, like so many places around here, was finding copper. And so for the first 100 years or so, this was a copper mining center. And actually, before they ran out of the easy copper to get, 1975, it was something like 8 billion pounds of copper were extracted through both underground and surface mining. So 1975 is an important period of time for us because once mining kind of stopped, of course, the mining companies had contracted to a level where they were starting to pull back and people started losing jobs or having to transfer to mines in other parts of Arizona. So that left kind of a hole in the city's economy. It contracted from about 20,000 people down to about 5,000 people, where we kind of remain today. But this provided an opportunity for people to come in and start doing different things. A lot of artists showed up in town and took over a lot of the commercial district stores, which had gone empty because of the cessation of mining. Eventually, we have become an art center as well as a tourist center in southern Arizona. So that's kind of our secret sauce, is where we were resilient enough to stage a comeback that keeps us healthy and thriving today.
That's incredible, and it's a common trope. I've spoken to leaders in Lake County, Colorado, and they have a very strong mining community. But
Right.
Similarly, at some point, they have to transition, and they're doing a similar thing with tourism. So that is a special sauce. It's not easy to do, so I've heard. So that is very incredible. Now let's take this apart a little bit. Let's get into your story. What was childhood like? Did you always know you were going to be the city manager? I know you've been mayor other places. Did you always know you were going to get into public service?
Well, I guess I did. It was come by it a little bit, honestly, because the community, my hometown in Ohio, which is a city called Maumee, which is right next door to Toledo, separated by the Ohio Turnpike. So it was a more urban environment, of course, than what I live in today. So there was a lot of opportunities there for economic development that I'll talk about maybe in a moment. But in that era, and I was born in the 50s, so that gives you a little bit of context of time and culture. We were still seeing a lot of urban centers with large families. Mine and my wife's is no exception. I'm the second oldest of 8 children. My wife is the oldest of 9. And on my block, which was a standard city block, at a point around 1965, 66, there were 72 kids living on that block. Okay. I don't think there's 72 kids living in the subdivision here where City Hall is in this day and age. So, in being the second oldest of 8 kids, probably provided some early leadership training, if you will. I don't know that I would allow my kids or grandchildren to do this today. I was babysitting my younger brothers and my sister when I was 10, 11 years old. I mean, that now, I didn't think much about it at the time, scares the heck out of me today. But it was early leadership training. So also having a dad who had gotten involved in politics and was a local businessman. He had won a seat on the city council in the 1970s. He served through the 70s and then retired in the 80s and moved to Florida, like so many people do when they reach a certain age. And so a couple of years later, I was able to get elected to a seat, not necessarily to take his place, but because the seat was available, I ran and won. I would serve for 9 years in the city council role. 4 of those 9 years were as what we call the president of council, or some people call it the mayor pro tem, which was eventually the way I end up ascending to the mayor's office because the mayor had gotten elected to a county office and vacated the seat. So as president of council, I became mayor and then got elected to the job twice more over 7-year periods. That was pretty much the totality of my career as a politician. Did I have aspirations for higher office? Of course I did. In my 30s and 40s during that period of time, and that a lot of us had aspirations for higher office. It gets more difficult, of course, as you try to move into the county or the state or even federal level. And after a while, as mayor, and spending all that time going to meetings and interfacing with the non-elected part of our profession, I began to realize that the city managers that I was dealing with on a daily basis, they not only got to do a lot of the things that I was interested in doing, but they also made a living doing it. In the meantime, I was having to do this in addition to my full-time job, and there was some conflict involved in that as far as time and not every private employer is excited to have a mayor on their payroll. Let's just put it that way. So after a period of time, I decided to start putting the feelers out there, and I made a conscious decision. I made a decision not to run for mayor again. And so in the process of putting the feelers out there, I ended up getting an interview and then getting hired in Colorado, in a little town named Berthoud, which is on the North Front Range. And I did spend almost 7 years in Colorado, working in 2 different small towns, most of which are not so small anymore, mostly because they were North Front Range communities. And if you're familiar with the I-25 corridor, there isn't anything small about it anymore. So happily, I wound up here in Bisbee in 2006, and which was by no means the end of the story. I just didn't know it at the time. And so coming in and learning the city and its history and its issues and everything else, I spent 8 consecutive years as the city manager here. So that was 06 through the end of 2013. Most notable thing about that era was what we now call the Great Recession. And the Great Recession was an opportunity for almost all of us to go bankrupt, whether we were private or public. Bisbee was very fortunate. I mean, we hunkered down. uh, 09 and 10 and even 11 were very challenging times because we didn't have any spare cash to spend on anything. And we were lucky to maintain uh, our employment, but we maintained the city. We did 0 capital improvements during that period of time because we were just trying to stay on the plus side. And we did lose some employees. I didn't have to lay anybody off, but as if people would resign, then we would just leave those positions open. And just a little bit of trivia, I think at the beginning of this year, we finally got back up to the same employment level that we were at when the recession started. So it was a long road back. So anyway, and this is, I guess I'm going to talk about this because it's part of our profession. You don't always get to stay where you want to be. Sometimes that comes as a result of an election. New people get elected to mayor and council seats, and sometimes they don't think you're doing the job they want you to do. And so there's a couple different ways they can affect change there. I was fortunate enough, I walked out under my own power, but knew at the same time that there were 3 people on council who had gotten elected, wanted somebody else doing the job. They didn't know who, but they just wanted somebody else doing the job. So I ended up going to work in another iconic place in Arizona, the city of Winslow, where you can stand on the corner, literally, and boasted a downtown along the former Route 66, which is what makes all of that area iconic and historic. So it was kind of interesting. I met the mayor of Winslow at the time at a League of Cities conference. He said, well, we just advertised for somebody and we didn't find anybody, and we're going to advertise again. You want to apply? I said, sure. So, and then by the time I got there for the interview, I found out I was the only guy they were interviewing, which is, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, maybe everybody else knew more than I did, or maybe I was just the only one they wanted. I don't know. I still don't know to this day. Don't care. But honored nonetheless, because I had a 2-hour interview with the mayor and the city council. And when the interview was over, they told me that the city attorney was going to be calling me on Monday with an offer. So that was the fun part. The not so fun part is Winslow was like a lot of Route 66 towns that had been bypassed by Interstate 40. And even though it had happened years ago, the recovery from the loss of the traffic going around instead of stopping in the cities along Route 66 was real. And you know, there was no magic formula, no template for bringing yourself back. Everybody did their own thing a little bit differently. Some are still struggling along the corridor. Not so much in Arizona, but somewhat in New Mexico and some in Oklahoma, and not so much in Texas, but in Oklahoma for sure. I've spent some time in more recent years stopping along the way and seeing how other communities have recovered. And we were indeed in an unfortunate place. Number one, we had that wonderful song that came out in the 1970s called Take It Easy. And, you know, when one of the lyrics in the song is standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona, people are going to go down Interstate 40. They see the signs and they're going to want to stop. And so they did. Right now, they're getting about 150,000 visitors a year uh, that get out of their cars and physically want to stand on a corner, get their picture taken on standing on a corner park. And the growth that has been a part of that one corner literally was the catalyst that we used to regenerate the business district into what it is today. It may or may not be a positive expression, but I tell people that when I first arrived in Winslow, I could roll a bowling ball down the middle of the street on Route 66 in downtown Winslow and not only needed to worry about hurting the ball. Today, downtown Winslow is a happening place. And I think that, I guess I take a good deal of satisfaction out of being a part of the renaissance of the downtown area. There had been some money invested in Winslow before that helped deal with the changing infrastructure. And we continue to make those changes. We started looking at other tasks like becoming a dark sky city, which they haven't achieved yet, but they will soon. We even partnered with the state park system because there's a state park right outside the city called Homology. And Homology is now the home of the Winslow Homology Observatory, which we had a chance to build over time. And quite frankly, we're about to emulate here in Bisbee in the coming year. So anyway, it was a great gig. Okay. But it was tough work. And by that time I was in my 60s. And so I started feeling it, if you will. So one day I asked the city council to convene to talk about my retirement, and I gave a year's notice. I don't know if I don't know if I'd recommend that again. In some ways, a year's maybe too much time, but I wanted to make sure that we left it not just better than we found it, but in a manner which it would continue to be better. And I think if you talk to the mayor up there today and the city manager up there today, I think you will find that they have continued to progress at an extraordinary level. And that makes me happy. One of the reasons why that makes me happy is because the city manager is the guy I wanted to take the job. And maybe we can touch on that a little bit too later. So anyway, I did retire. I retired at the age of 63. Whether that was the right thing to do or not, we still don't know the answer. However, it only took a few weeks after I retired to get a phone call from a couple of city council members in Bisbee saying, we just fired our city manager. We need help now. So now I had just retired. I had just started getting my pension check. I had just gone on Social Security. All those things have limitations. Okay. in the first year or two. And so, I was kind of betwixt and between. So I said, well, let's talk. So we talked about it, and I said, well, I can't just come back to work. I don't want to, number one. Number two, you're on Social Security. The first year you can only make a certain amount of money, and that year was $17,000. And I just got on the state pension program, and the first year you can only work for 19 weeks. So I said, I can come back and help you for 19 weeks for $17,000. Now, of course, that's a smoking deal. They took me up on my offer. And so Peggy and I basically lived more here than we did in Winslow during that period of time. My two major tasks were to craft a budget, number one, and number two, hire a city manager. So we managed to do all that in a lot more in that 19 weeks. And then, so I went back into retirement, took the rest of the year off. We were looking at houses in Bisbee while we were down there. We ended up buying a house here and moving back down at the end of 2019. So now I was home. So now the next year was 2020. There's not much to talk about there. The world rolled up and closed. Our goal for 2020 was to visit all 5 national parks in Utah and hit Yosemite if we had the chance. We haven't done any of that yet. Boom. The park system closed down in 2020. We didn't get to go anywhere. And then around 2021, new mayor got elected. Happened to be a friend of mine who served on council the first time I worked here. The city manager left, and he called me up and he said, well, we're still in COVID. We don't want to recruit. Can you come back? And so I said, well, if council agrees, I'll be happy to come back for however long it takes to do whatever we need to do. And that was, well, almost 5 years ago. So here we are now. Fill in a couple of blanks. Why has it been 5 years? Well, it's been 5 years for a couple of reasons. I'm sitting in one of the reasons right now. In 2017, when I wasn't here, they burned the place down. And burning the place down was only the beginning of the saga, because one of the things we like to do here in Bisbee is we like to think things to death, if you will. So, and everybody has an opinion. So the hundreds of opinions and locations and how much we want to spend to build a city hall resulted in, basically chronic indecision. The indecision led to nothing happening. And so the shell of this building sat there for about 4 years before I came back. And for a while, of course, after I came back. Now, the neighbors around this place didn't forget who I was. And so the minute I came back to work, the phone started ringing. And some of them were the neighbors, including the church across the street and the pastor of that church, who lives across the other street because we're on a corner. And led to having to make certain representations that we were going to actually do something here. We took all that data that had been collected, and we figured out from all of that data, all that public input, everything, that the best place to rebuild City Hall was right where City Hall is. And so I'm sitting in the City Hall that I worked in years ago, except that everything here is new except for the front of the building. And we managed to salvage the front entryway to the building because it was the most architecturally distinct feature of the building. It was built in 1907, actually by a mining company. And so the entryway was grand, and we were able to salvage that part from the fire. So that long saga resulted in us moving back into this building in May of this year. So it's been a long haul, but very popular in the community, very popular amongst our employees. And everybody knows where we are and what we are, and are happy to be able to do this. Plus, of course, all of our systems are brand new now. It's a little bit less to maintain. The bigger challenge, I think, coming back here, and the reason that things kind of fell apart and the city manager left, was the state pension, the police and fire pension. And I'm going to refer to it as PSPRS because those are the initials. Essentially, it's a pension system for police officers and firefighters. Over a period of time, they had allowed the unfunded part of the pension to grow from about $5 million when I left to up to $23 million. $23 million was costing us over $1 million a year in payments, plus the regular pension accruals. And then the plan that they used to pay off the unfunded liability was basically run up your credit card and make the minimum payments. Now, we've all done it. Okay. We've all had that one experience where we had a $3,000 credit card and we ran it up to $3,000. And when we made that $25 payment at the end of the month, the next bill came in at $3,100. That's what was going on. That's how the debt got so high. So fortunately, over the years, becoming acquainted with financial advisors and bond counsels that could get us out of that jam, we were able to refinance the debt, pay off the unfunded liability, and we went from uh, 100. Well, we were about 10% funded 3 years ago. Today, we're 110% funded. Now, we still have the debt, but what's magic about the debt is that it's about $500,000 lower a year, the payments, than it was before I came back because, well, the pension system's interest rate was 7.3%, which in an era of 3% money. So we were paying premium interest rates. And so now, unfortunately, I did get to refinance at that low 3% rate, but we did get money at 5%. And that allowed us to not only level off the payments over the next 20 years, but it allowed us to also get cash back into the general fund, which we then made a conscious decision to reinvest in our employees who had not had a raise in a number of years. So it solved a ton of problems and brought the morale up from about here to about here. Well, I guess on a podcast, it would be from very low to very high. So now those are two things. There's a bunch of stuff we were able to do. I don't want to I know you've got some other things you want to talk about, but that's kind of my story in a nutshell of my career. Yes, if anybody's interested, I'm still looking for a way to retire, but today's not the day, but I will be making an exit next year for sure.
I'm going to hold you to that, Steve. Just looking at history, I'm not going to hold you to that. Wow. What a career you've been able to experience all sides from mayor and council to city manager in very different places, to seeing how towns have rebuilt from mining communities in the past to where they are now. To one of the things I loved was how the mix of art and culture kind of spurred economic development in Winslow, like a song spurring so much investment. That was very cool to hear. And yes, I think it is incredible to see that they went another way for a second, but that the cream always rises to the top, and they called you right back. So wow, thank you for sharing your wealth of wisdom. Now, kind of getting to more the X's and O's of Bisbee. What are, and have you guys done like a strategic plan or comprehensive plan recently? What are some of the main strategic goals as they stand right now?
Okay, well, actually, that's a good question for this period of time because we are in the process right now of updating our. Some people call it a comprehensive plan. We call it a general plan. Same thing, different name. We are actually, Arizona law requires us to update or at least review strategic plans on at least a 10-year interval. So it's been 10 years. And I was able to recruit and hire a very intelligent young man who had just come out of grad school. And where he lacked experience, he more than made up in just his ability to comprehend and learn, and his inquisitive mind has had him all over the place talking to all the different kind of people, and some of whom are, long haulers here, like me, who have retired from active service and but still have a wealth of knowledge and wisdom about Bisbee that have been helping him. So this year in 2025, he's been actively getting some things changed that need to be changed and recognizing things that don't need to be changed and setting those aside unless some public input down the line would reopen that conversation. One of the things that, and nobody who works for a city anywhere in the country is not going to recognize that we have issues with housing, and mostly the ability to provide housing that people can afford to live in a small town and work here, and also to provide housing to people who may not have housing, of which every city has a contingent of that. And, I know some of my friends and neighbors here in Bisbee think that this is a Bisbee problem, and it is definitely a Bisbee problem. But if you want to substitute the word Bisbee for any other city in America, it's a problem there too. I never thought earlier in my career that I would be in the housing business, but here we are, squarely in the housing business. The meeting that I was in just before I joined you was a housing meeting. So a lot of what is going to be in our general plan update is going to be about housing. Okay. The economic development piece doesn't need a ton of work. All of the other aspects of a general plan, the infrastructure part, we're actually in pretty good shape compared to where we were 20 years ago on infrastructure, thanks to some good help from the voters. And so the big problem is that we're facing is, can people live and work in Bisbee, Arizona? That's the basic question that we work with. That's the question we're answering. And so and I ended up, by the way, I not only got one planner, I've got two. And one actually is a housing specialist and did a lot of housing work for the city of Tucson. And when she retired, and she and her husband moved here in retirement, a little bit like I did. And so she was working for the local council of governments, and her contract expired, so I snagged her. And so she's been working with us. We have a lot of people doing housing now. We've got what we call a workforce housing program. The magic of workforce housing is we've got what appears to be several hundred unoccupied residential structures in the community, some of which we can acquire, some of which we can't for various and sundry reasons. But those we can acquire, for the most part, we renovate those structures using a nonprofit corporation that we call Step Up Bisbee NACO. NACO is a little village to the south of us, right on the Mexican border, unincorporated area. Step Up Bisbee has been a nonprofit here for many years, and we were able to use their talent to start actually renovating whole houses. Their role before that was just to repair houses for people who couldn't afford it. And now they're building whole houses, and that's morphed over a period of about 5 or 6 years. We've finished 10 houses in the last 5 years and sold them to people who work for Bisbee employers, mostly in the service industries. So if you're, if you're a first responder, if you're a public works employee, if you're a teacher, if you're a nurse, those occupations where you're kind of in that hole where I make good money, but I can't afford a house. That's the community that's serving. And so now, not to belabor that program too much, but just to tell you where we're going with it, we have now got plans to build 17 more of those houses. Okay. I sometimes wonder at what point is the market saturated? I'm not worried about that happening anytime soon. So I think we can certainly do these 17 additional houses and sell them to people who actually are working here presently. The key to it is we're trying to keep the price down at about 20% below what it would appraise at. And that 20% is crucial when it comes to, financing a home. And we haven't sold one over 200,000 yet. And it kind of creeps me out because the early houses we were selling at around $100,000. I might be old, but I'm not too old to remember how tough it was to buy my first house. And so, but I mean, well, just go on Zillow, for crying out loud. Where do you find a home under 250 grand anymore? And so, and they can be financed. Of course, the buyer has to be able to make the payments over the next 20 or 30 years. And the only thing we require from the buyer is that they don't sell the house for 5 years. So, because, if they're able to get it 20%, with 20% equity up front, the only thing we're asking is that they don't cash in on the equity in less than 5 years. Otherwise, if they want to upgrade after that, they're free to do it. That's the American way. And so and we've got an old hospital that sits up on the bluff above the new hospital that we now own. And we're in the process right now. We've cleaned it out. We got an EPA grant for $500,000 to remove all the hazardous materials. The last dumpster just rolled off the site a couple of days ago. We're hoping to sell that for development for low-income housing. I don't really want to be in the housing business. What we want to do is facilitate the additional housing coming to pass. And I think we're going to probably see a buyer for that one. Optimistic, thinking that that could be before the end of 2025. And once that's developed, it will develop 30 to 40 rental units for low-income housing. We do have the county runs the housing authority, and we're the county seat, so we're particularly well situated to work with the county housing authority to provide the ability for low-income people to be able to afford to live in that housing development. And there's a lot of other stuff going. Part of the general plan update, and this is kind of a key part, is we didn't allow tiny housing. We didn't allow manufactured housing in our code. We haven't finished doing the general plan update yet, but we have already asked council to make those changes so that we could start looking for those kinds of things to occur. We have a 17-acre parcel of land that the city owns that we have recently sold to a tiny home developer. And 17 acres will probably get us 50 or 60 houses when that's fully developed. And right now it's just a bare piece of land, but it's in a residential neighborhood. So it's perfectly situated, and it's right next to a former elementary school that has been converted into an annex for our library system, and also is the home of what we call the Bisbee Science Lab. So so not only is it in a perfect neighborhood for residential development, but it's also family friendly. There's all kinds of things to do right within that nucleus of a neighborhood. So that's those two things, the science lab, the library, and the tiny home development, mean really good things in the next 5 years for that part of town. So, now that wasn't something I came back to work to do. That was just there when I got here. We've managed to make the most of it. And it'll be part of leaving it better than we found it. So now, we just talked in a few minutes about a lot of different things. And in and among that is, of course, is the overall general quality of life stuff. I don't know if you can see it right there. That's a picture I took of a total eclipse, which is a way of saying I do have a hobby. And one of the reasons I want to nudge myself back into retirement is so I can pursue that a little bit more. And if you want to, we can talk about that at your leisure as well, because we're doing some good things in town for that too.
Nice. Wow. You're in the housing business, but it sounds like any person in your seat that understands the issues that are going on would make an effort to either arm's length away or have to acquire properties. We generally hear that there's a housing crisis throughout the nation. What are some of the factors? Is it a lack of? It sounds like you have land. Is it more of affordability? Is it matching the job income to the housing price? Because certain places. I remember I was talking about the community in Colorado. They're landlocked. So it's like they don't have any space. What are kind of the contributing factors?
Well, it's I'm going to try and couch this as apolitically as I can, because you can't get the politics out of the boy, but you get the boy out of politics, which is kind of what I've done. I think that there's a certain amount of and we don't call it a crisis here, we call it a challenge, but it's a huge one. Okay, no doubt about it. It just seems a lot easier to conquer a challenge than a crisis. And so that's kind of the attitude with which we've been attacking or, taking the bite out of the elephant or whatever you want to call it. So, I'll be 70 years old in a couple of weeks. I've seen a lot of change happen, and I've had a ringside seat, really, if you think about it, being involved in local government, where the impacts of economic change, climate change, all of that stuff, this is where we see it first. This is where it happens before our very eyes. Part of, while I believe that we have a fairly attentive congressional delegation serving us here, at least in the southern part of Arizona, and our two senators, it's still very hard for them to legislate something in the state capitol or in Washington where they really see the impact of what occurs at the local level. Part of it's going to be cultural. Okay. Part of it's economic. When I was 19 years old, I bought my first house. Okay. I was making $3 an hour plus benefits at a grain elevator. And I bought my first house for $23,000. If you look at the ratio of my income and the cost of buying and owning your largest asset, for most people, your home, that ratio has gone from relatively attainable to very difficult. Okay. Over a period of time. Just in the last 5 years, okay, when I moved back to Bisbee in 2019, I bought a house for $225,000. The house two doors down is built the same year by the same builder. I just sold for $450,000. Now, I just would submit to you that wages and benefits haven't risen by a similar amount over that period of time. And in that respect, Bisbee is no more unique, no different than any other middle-class community in America, and maybe better than most, because if I go back to the last community where I lived in Colorado, that $450,000 house is now $750,000. Wages are a little higher, but not by the same ratio. Economically, we have priced ourselves out of home affordability. And that's why what we're doing today is necessary. And by the way, without any real state or federal help financially, by the way. Okay. Now, there is a housing department in Arizona. They do fund some housing projects. Most of that tends to be in the more urban centers. Uh, you know, Perhaps that makes some sense because that's where the challenge gets bigger. The overall people's ability to buy that crucial first house, man, it's just because, I feel bad every time I encounter one of these situations, which for me is daily, because I wish not only that, we can only do so much as a small community. And by the way, my two housing specialists go all over the state telling people how we've done it. We're actually kind of a model. I don't know if that's helping us or hurting us getting assistance from state government because we've had some degree of success. But the problem is the challenge is still there. And it won't go away until the gap between your standard of living and your ability to afford and I always want to refer to the first home because the first home is, of course, the hardest. And I think that, if you look at the general economy, okay, and let's just be realistic. The difference between the haves and the haves not keeps widening. And that's a social problem. Okay. I am almost totally unable to solve that social problem. I think our friends in Washington can do a lot more to help. And I think our friends in Phoenix can do a lot more to help because they don't see it on the ground the same way we do. They're less inclined. Okay. And I'm not just talking about wages. Okay. Let's talk about, Medicare and Medicaid. Okay. I don't want to talk about Medicare and Medicaid, but it needs to be told that that is part of the problem. Okay. There's maybe 30% of the people who live in Bisbee are Medicaid recipients. Okay. The interesting part is that some of them don't even know they're Medicaid recipients because we don't call it Medicaid in the States. We call it here, it's called access. And I was in a meeting with about 25 people one day and I said, how many people are on Medicaid here? And nobody raised their hand. And then I said, how many people benefit from the access program? And half of them raised their hand. And I said, are you aware that's the same? And it's like, now I have a table of all 50 states and what they call their some of them call it Medicaid. Most of them have a different name for it. And so we're not connecting the dots. And I'm not saying that solves the problem. I'm just saying that if they raise awareness, then the issue becomes a lot more urgent. And I know that depending on your political leanings, you either like Medicaid or you don't. I'm sorry, but because of the wealth gap that currently exists in America today, Medicaid is absolutely necessary. I'd love to be able to make it unnecessary. I doubt that's going to happen in my lifetime, even if we started today. But those are things that people don't realize have an impact all the way to Main Street. And the impact isn't felt in Washington. It just starts in Washington. And so now, like I say, at least, and I know our two senators, they both know where Bisbee is. They're both on a first name basis with my mayor. And they both come down here relatively frequently. That's just one side of the Capitol building. The other side of the Capitol building is equally important. So we need to start, and I think we have politically. Of course, I don't get involved in politics because I'm a city manager, but my politicians are getting more and more vocal, shall we say, making sure that our issues are articulated up the chain. But I think that, again, without taking sides, I think the attitude has to change, both in Washington and in Phoenix, in order to put me out of the housing business. Okay. I guess, okay, if that's where we're headed, and put me out of the housing business, I would love to go out of the housing business. But all of that has to happen in order to.
That makes a ton of sense. It's all interconnected, and I do think naturally, especially coming from the private sector, especially we want to isolate the issue, go at it, and find something else to tackle. But they are so interconnected. I have to put you on the spot as I do everyone. You stated some huge issues that aren't unique to Bisbee, obviously, but they are affecting your community. If you had unlimited budget, unlimited time, and unlimited workforce to tackle one challenge, and if you could just snap your fingers and make it change, what would that challenge be?
Boy,
The tough one.
you're the first guy this week to give me that option. So I guess kind of the sum total of what we've been talking about. If I could snap my fingers and make everybody able to afford a good life for themselves and their families, to be able to participate fully in family life, get a good education, and participate in a positive way in their community, that would do it.
Sure. And I'm gonna do something I don't always do, but I want to isolate with your response. Would that be through increasing the amount or the pay of jobs, or would that be trying to make sure that there's enough housing stock so you don't have to work 18 doubles in a month to get by? Which side do you think you would
Well, as much as we hate to, point the finger at money being the solution to the problem, I'm sorry, but there we are. Just one example. When I came back to work in 21, the guys that were driving the garbage trucks were making $13 an hour. That wasn't making it. Okay. It was kind of, I don't want to call it ignored. Okay. I think management understood that, but I think they were at their wits' end trying to figure out how to affect that change. Well, I just mentioned a couple of ways that change has occurred and the way we were able to make that change without any thought whatsoever. I went to the finance department and to the HR department, and I said, we are, except for our part-time seasonal folks, okay, which are like lifeguards at the pool and that sort of thing, nobody will be making less than $15 an hour effective with the next payroll period. So, I mean, that affected the lives of a couple of dozen people. More than that when you add their families. And still $15 is, I mean, in 2021, $15 an hour, I mean, that's just barely making it. Okay. I don't think we're up to 20 yet, but I think we're close to $18.50, $19 an hour at the minimum. We had across the board increases 3 years in a row that made sure that our minimum wage, if you want to call it that, our lowest wage, is now much closer to $20 an hour than $13 an hour. Money doesn't buy happiness. These people's morale is much higher now, believe me. And they feel appreciated both by their bosses and I think that their appreciation, their gratitude shows in the quality of their work. And if you're, it's a lot better to be working for somebody who appreciates you than just working for the man. And pretty much they don't feel that way anymore. I had other 2 bargaining units that we don't negotiate. We don't do collective bargaining here, but I do have 2 union groups that we do meet and confer with on an annual basis or so. In fact, I'll be meeting with one next Monday. That has helped me. And of course, Ohio is a collective bargaining state, so I've been down that road too. By contrast, this is a walk in the park. It's when you don't have that specter of binding arbitration and other enforcement actions hanging over the head of discussions between labor and management, it tends to go a lot better. And I always learn something out of that. These people are learning along the way. They're learning their jobs. They're learning how to do things. They're learning the latest skills, and they're learning more about the people we serve because, hey, if you're a medic, it doesn't get any more upfront and personal than that. Okay. If you're a police officer, it doesn't get any more up close and personal than that. And they sometimes can come to me and tell me things I don't know about what's happening out there in the community and how that can be changed. And so now I know since we're not a collective bargaining state, a lot of my colleagues in city management don't want to go anywhere near the prospect of a meeting and conferring. But I've always told them, I said, you're thinking about it the wrong way. Okay. Um, I think about it as an experience to make the city a better place. The way to, as I like to say, the way to get to yes. And it didn't happen while I was gone in Winslow, and it should. And so while some of the folks were a little bit leery when I came back, but here comes the old man's coming back. I wonder if he's still got it. And I had a couple of intense meetings with one of the labor groups because, there were some things going on that, weren't in the best interest of the city, and I'll go further, but they wanted to solve those problems as much as I did. And, every time, I mean, there were some real changes, real costly changes in our benefits program to get these people back to not just making a decent living, but a competitive wage, in Southern Arizona. And of course that people start to question, what are you doing? Well, we had differences of opinion and you just didn't hear about them. And so we talked about those differences and we found yes along the way. So what we're going to gain by doing this is not going to bankrupt you. It's going to make you more prosperous. And we haven't had a problem financially by making any of those changes.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Make sure that people are paid a fair wage, and
Mhm.
they'll they'll potentially work even harder, and at least at the very least feel more comfortable and able to have the mental space to carry out the job. Now, you also brought up at the end of that the future. And that is
Mhm.
actually my final question. In 25 years, what will they be saying about Bisbee, Arizona?
Well, I think even more positives than what I think we've already earned because so much of our livelihood is and our economy is built on tourism. Um, I've had the good fortune to have some really, really talented people on the tourism side of our business that have really helped earn what I would consider a sterling reputation amongst not just in Arizona, but nationwide, internationally. I mean, until tariffs became the salad of the month, we were getting all kinds of Canadian tourists, not so much anymore. But it's not because they're mad at us. Okay. I mean, we had one vendor that would sell us a billboard earlier this year. We want to, okay? That's the response. We want to, uh, but politics won't allow us. So we know the Canadians still love us and we know that they want to come down here. Once again, we're waiting for somebody else to make a good decision that will make that happen again. 5 years from now, I don't want to be just the place Canadians want to visit. Yeah, I want to be the place the whole world comes to visit. We know that we get a fair amount of European guests, less so, but a little bit from the Asian countries. But we're making the inroads, and we're working with one of our we've actually it's kind of a fledgling business group that has been getting its wings. I guess if you fledge, you eventually get your wings. We've been working with them and some of their expertise in some areas where we don't have it to penetrate that tourism market even more in depth than what we have been to date. The penetration has been good, but it can always be better. I'm never going to be the best at anything, but hopefully I'm getting better every day. And we're using those assets, if you will, human resources, if you will, to bring about even more success in the one thing that we do the best, and that's our tourism economy. So 25 years from now, yeah, I don't want anybody in the world not to know where Bisbee, Arizona is.
I love that. To be an international destination, I think is a great plan for 25 years. And you guys have proven that you're resilient already. So now it's just executing on that next level strategy. Steve, I alluded in the beginning, I knew this was going to be a great one. I really appreciate your time, you giving us such an incredible walkthrough of your journey, and then being candid with some of the not crises, but challenges that are facing your community and how you guys are already addressing them. So on behalf of everyone at Gentry, I did want to say thank you for being here.
Okay. And if I could just say one more thing, I don't want to leave
Yeah.
any misconceptions behind.
Yes, indeed.
I plan to make my exit next year. That doesn't mean I'm finished.
Whoa. Okay. That is a great way to end. So I'll definitely have to keep following and just
Still
see where
things I can do. Still things I can do without having to work a full-time job.
Okay. All right. All right. I'm excited. Well, to our viewers, this has been another episode of the Jentry Podcast. Again, we had Steve Pauken, the city manager of Bisbee, Arizona, the man who won't retire and possibly will do some more. So for all of us, I'd like to say thank you, and we'll see you next time. Have a great one.
Thank you.